We're here with Liliana Bakhtiari, frontrunner candidate for City Council District 5. Yes! Nailed it! For those who really are unfamiliar, what neighborhoods are considered a part of District 5?
Okay, so I'm prefacing this with the fact that we're going to be going into redistricting after the census comes in, so that'll change. But right now, we're actually currently in the district. So we're in District 5, but it's a little bit of Old Fourth and downtown and Sweet Auburn, and then a little bit of Grant Park, and it's Cabbagetown, Reynoldstown, Glenwood Park, East Atlanta, Edgewood Neighbors, Kirkwood, Lake Claire, Eastlake.
Which one's your favorite?
That's a trap question.
Edgewood?
How about this? Every single one, it has something I love about it.
Well,
that's my political answer.
Okay,
honestly, I've known this district and been in this district since I was about 5 years old. So I love pretty much every single one of these neighborhoods because I've been in them since the 90s.
This is your second time running for a District 5 council seat. What do you consider the most important responsibility or duty of the District 5 council seat?
I think our local offices have a tendency of talking about the people that need help instead of to them. I'm sure y'all have experienced that here with just the business association, what y'all have been trying to get done.
Right.
The most important things that council does, a lot of people are unfamiliar because we focus so much on national races. Okay. But from the moment you step out and try to walk down a sidewalk, emphasis on try, but try to walk down a sidewalk, try to drive down a road or bicycle, or try to take public transit, or if you're, turning on utilities or water, or if you are trying to open a small business, if you're trying to do anything around helping our unsheltered population or anything that concerns the budget, that is all city council.
Gotcha.
So, pretty much everything that affects your day-to-day life, 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yes.
The thing that's going to most immediately impact you when it comes to governance is your municipal government, which is Atlanta City Council.
In the District 5 race, you've raised the most money so far. What's the secret behind your fundraising success?
One, having lived here and done mutual aid work for so long. So a majority of the donations, and we've raised about $193,000.
Nice.
And that's from around 1,400 different donors.
Wow.
So that is fueled by mostly small dollar donations. So we have people that I think our smallest donation is $1. Nice. Chris, did I get that right? And our biggest has been 2,800. Wow. So, which is the max out. But those are far fewer than all of the smaller dollar donations that we get. Right. So the big secret behind that is small dollar donations and doing things like events like these, or trying to be out and about and trying to make it as accessible as possible. Because for a long time, a lot of people feel like they can't donate because they feel like their donations are too small.
Right.
Because we're so used to seeing big dollar donations come into the offices. And my race has been, we try to make it a point to be like, because I've been broke and I've been homeless, if they feel like they can donate, they feel more inclined to be a part of the conversation.
I understand.
So the secret has been trying to do a lot of grassroots events. Today we're doing a massive drag show at Noni's in October. And I also have built a big network of people that are also considered bigger politicos in the city, and taught them or showed them that I'm a candidate that they can get behind. Whereas last time I was just painted radical. I was like, what you consider radical is actually competent government. Right. And able to paint it in the light of like, this is how we can actually function as a cohesive city government with all governing bodies involved. And that's gotten a lot of buy-in from bigger donors that typically wouldn't have donated to candidates like me.
What are your hopes and expectations for the LGBTQIA representation in local politics moving forward?
Well, to have it, but so I am queer, and also am in the midst of becoming non-binary. That's an exploration for myself. The point of having LGBTQIA plus representation, and I don't just mean somebody who considers himself an ally, or that's great, but I mean somebody who's going to pick up the torch of understanding what it's like to be homeless and gay on the street. Like to having to do things like a lot of our homeless youth. We actually have a lot of queer homeless youth in the city. We actually, I think it was a couple of years ago, from the youth that we were able to survey, about 50% of them identified as LGBTQIA. And those are of the people we found. So we know the number's a lot higher.
Right.
So there's a lot of those kids that are depending on having to turn to survival sex and other means of work to make ends meet. We're not setting them up to succeed. I would actually want, what it means to me is actually having somebody that understands the struggles of being queer and growing into that identity. Right. Somebody who's going to understand the constantly changing fluidity of that identity and not try to dismiss it or dismiss people's struggles and try to categorize them to what has been a pretty traditional binary for a very long time.
Right.
It's a constantly changing world. Making space for people to be a part of that conversation, not allowing our city to sit on millions of dollars that can be put towards HIV and AIDS, right. Having low barrier housing for people that are gay and unsheltered, and just doing more to do trans housing protections as well, trans protections period, right. Especially for our women of color. So that's a start. But that's why those are the exact reasons why we need somebody on council who's going to have the ability to affect policy to protect those individuals.
If elected, name your 3 biggest actions you plan to enact to impact the Old Fourth Ward.
So one is actually working with the businesses and residents here and not just talking about them, but every business along here is extraordinary and gives a lot to this community. And especially just over on Auburn Avenue, you have Remerge and all these other organizations that are trying to do more in the community and actually giving them the platform to do their work. Working with the local churches to see how we can utilize a lot of the empty spaces that sit around here and like that have that become drop spots or encampments that could be utilized to actually help people in the community. Right. But actually, like, for example, the street closure, y'all worked really hard for that. The city didn't listen or work with you all on how to make that happen. They just did what they did. And actually doing a lot more around transit. When the streetcar was first put in, which is why, I mean, it's great, but a lot of the things that I heard from new people coming in, a lot of the vocabulary used around the streetcar was, we really hope it gets rid of the crime and those people. I'm not saying that that was the city's intention or the mayor's intention, but the way that it was talked about around here was really problematic. And the way that they hoped that it would change the dynamics and erase a lot of the folks or move them away from here rather than helping them. This is the birthplace of the civil rights movement. You have the first black-owned newspaper just down the street. You have Auburn Avenue, home to SCLC and a number of other things, all of which are owned by a lot of white developers now. But the fact of the matter is that you have an area that was cradle to a lot of movements that hasn't improved in the decades that I've lived here. So it's actually doing more to provide more low barrier housing, more wraparound services for the people that are unhoused on the street, because that has fallen to the small businesses to take care of. Those folks, y'all have stepped in to fill the gap that the city has left. Mr. Polly froze to death out here. And the only reason that happened, besides the fact that the city didn't have any resources, was because y'all weren't open because of pandemic, because the businesses here are the ones who typically took care of him. Not to mention getting the county commission, getting the commissioners to actually do something with Celine Butler over here, which is still closed, where there's still drop areas, where there's still crime happening, and we're setting up youth to fail. So there's a lot that needs to be done in Old Fourth Ward. But it starts with actually listening and working with the community to make that happen. Because there's not a single person here that doesn't want to see it improve.
Recently, I read a post you made on Instagram, and it definitely caught my eye, especially with Edgewood having such a large displaced population, like you said.
Yeah, I think you commented on it like 10 times.
I loved it. The part that caught my attention was, I stand in full support of the ATL Homeless Union. We punish people for their addictions, for their poverty, for their trauma, rather than understanding that they are products of the circumstances we have forced them into. Do you mind kind of diving a bit deeper into that?
A lot of what we are seeing now, and what we've heard the mayor's office and a lot of people in city government say, is that they blame the crime, poverty, and all these issues on the pandemic. The pandemic didn't create the largest income gap in the country. The pandemic didn't make it so that if you're born a black child in poverty in the city of Atlanta, you only have a 4% chance of getting out of it. The pandemic didn't make it so that Atlanta was the worst city to live in if you were on minimum wage. So that is once again pointing blame somewhere else instead of taking the leadership role of actually stepping in to admit where our city's faults are. What I meant when I said that was, Atlanta is a great city with a lot of resources, but it's a city that doesn't always love you back. And it tends to set people up to fail, not to succeed. The city of Atlanta has every ability to set up low barrier housing, to remove the current barriers that exist when you're trying to build housing by actually creating wraparound services for people experiencing mental illness or addiction. Because if you've been on these streets and you're chronically homeless, then you're going to have trauma, and you're probably going to have a number of things that you need help working through. And it also means like you don't just give somebody a meal and then walk away and feel good about yourself. It's about giving someone a fish and also teaching them how to fish. Right. Because a lot of times the city, what they do is rapid housing, where they put someone in a house and they walk away. And there's a shock value that comes with going from having nothing to being in a home and all the responsibility that comes with that. So a lot of those people end up back on the street again.
If you were able to hang out in the District 5 area.
I'm not saying that on the record.
Yes.
Well, I do spend a lot of time on Edgewood. You know, second Sunday service when Vicky Powell is DJing over at church, or, you know, visiting Ryan and the staff at Noni's. I'm going to start coming to our bar, although I don't think I'm going to make it in here. I've seen the videos. But no, typically weekend is like the chance I use to actually see my friends and go out and have a drink and try to decompress.
Yeah. All right, well, you mentioned the closure on Edgewood Avenue, so we're going to dive right into some of our concerns. You know, one of our biggest challenges right now is getting city departments aligned to bring solutions that some might say are innovative, but honestly, other cities, I mean, Birmingham, Alabama does it better than us. So to bring solutions that are really for the people, for pedestrians, you know, we've had the hardest time aligning, you know, city council members and their desires and what they want to see with Department of Transportation, with APD, with city planning. And it feels like there's a lot of silos in the city that the community is then asked to work through rather than the city working through them. As District 5 council member, how do you envision we can solve some of those challenges or get departments to work together better and then also work together with the community in a place where there's more communication and alignment?
Yeah, so we talked about how I ran in 2017, and the biggest thing I saw were the silos between the city and the state, silos between city and county, between city and APS, between city and city council members and other council members, but most importantly, council with the other departments within the city. We are the city of micromanagement and don't really want to do anything to break that down. So like if you wanted to put up a mural outside, you had to go through 9 offices. So I took it upon myself after the last one to try to create as many relationships within those silos as I possibly could. And I found that a lot of it is actually fixed by just having a conversation. I wish it was more complicated than folks not talking to each other, but it's really not more complicated than folks not talking to each other. I've been working with unions and the apprenticeship programs that they have, and they've been trying to get in touch with APS, and I was able to make a connection to the director of partnerships for APS in a day. But they didn't know who to go to, and APS didn't know that they were interested. People aren't talking to each other. And I think that a lot of that, and what you said it really perfectly, they're unwilling to do it, and they expect for the businesses and residents to go through those hoops instead. Which ends up effectively being how you end up having really inefficient people in offices for a very long time. I think my simple answer and like the most honest answer is I'm going to work to do everything I can to dismantle the silos, to talk to every person I can. I'm already doing that because I believe you should be the person outside of office that you want to be inside of office. You can ask Chris, it drives her nuts because I'm never not on my phone. And for, you know, disclaimer, Chris is my partner. But that's all I think about is like, how do we break down to make us more effective? Because if you don't have community buy-in, if people get sick of the process and they don't want to be involved, like when you try to pay for trash pickup and it doesn't come for 3 weeks, then people get defeated or they get frustrated and they say, screw it, I'm going to do it myself. And then you don't have an effective local government because everybody's taking things into their own hands. And then people don't show up to vote, they don't show up to fight for things, then everything falls apart, which is kind of happening now. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And then work from there to see what the next steps are going to be.
Well, what about mental illness and some of the medication needed, and what are your thoughts on that and how to kind of help with those struggles as well on top of addiction and just homelessness?
I mean, you have people with borderline personality disorder, with complex PTSD, with schizophrenia, with bipolar disorder, with a number of things. And honestly, most of us in this room probably have borderline personality disorder. People don't know that that's something that's born of trauma and doesn't mean you have people don't know that it's not like dissociative identity disorder. They don't know the names. So one, and speaking to that, a massive educational program citywide that actually explains to people what mental illness is and the different types that have, like what there is to combat stigma. And also, I believe what should be included in wraparound services is trauma therapy and trauma treatment work. So cognitive behavioral therapy, movement work, somatic movement. There's all sorts of things that can be done. And as somebody who has extensive trauma history, I had to do a lot of that work and learn about how inaccessible and expensive it is. When in fact, we actually have the budget to make these things more public. But it's not just on our unsheltered population to do that work, it's also on the public to educate themselves. And it's also on providing and expanding, like PAD, for example, which is like a pre-arrest diversion program that now is partnering with 301, giving them more money, expanding their services, making them 24/7, because you shouldn't be calling the police on somebody who has mental illness, right? Because they don't belong in jail.
Yeah.
They belong in a bed with some food and some empathy.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. All right, give it up for Miss Liliana Bakhtiari. Thank you. You ready for your shot?
Huh?
Tequila or Jameson?
Tequila. Who does Jameson as a shot?
Our bar, little bitch.